G'day and welcome back to the third episode of Adobe CQ Presents Making the Modern Leader, where we unpack and decode what creative leaders across Asia Pacific are doing at the moment to really lean into this emergent second renaissance of creativity, where they're pushing the boundaries and challenging the status quo through creativity. I'm Anders Sormanilson, author, futurist, and the co-creator of the Adobe CQ, the IQ test for your creative leadership. Today on this third episode, we're going to do a little deep dive into an area of creativity that we're often speaking about, but that is a little bit harder to put into practice. And that is, of course, skills in the context of creativity. And today I'm joined by two thought leaders from across the Asia Pacific region. Firstly, from Hong Kong today, I'm joined by the Chief Information Officer, the CIO of the Rosewood Hotels Group, Micah Friedman. Welcome to the show, Micah.
Thank you, Anders.
And secondly, to join us on the show as well is Huey Ng, who is the Adobe Senior Managing Director for the Greater China region, joining us here live on the show from Shanghai. Great to have you with us.
Hi, Anders. Hi, Micah. Good to be here.
So we're going to be engaging in a conversation here about a particular area of creativity, the third element of the Adobe CQ, which is, of course, skills. Now, leaders with a high Adobe CQ, they recognize that creativity really moves beyond just art and design outputs, and that it's really about a unique set of human skills, spanning things like interpersonal skills, insights, collaboration. And they are leaders who really foster creative culture, one that drives entrepreneurial skills such as collaboration and innovation. We might start with you, Micah. With only 26% of APAC leaders actually excelling, according to the Adobe CQ, in nurturing creative skills, I'm curious, what are the challenges or maybe barriers when it comes to developing creative skills? So these would be things like problem solving, collaboration, and of course, critical thinking in your experience.
So thank you, Anders. It is a unique combination that we look for in our teammates into driving creativity. Because in our industry, we sit at the nexus of brand immersion and allowing our visitors or providing them a great on-brand experience through giving them information in a way that's efficient and useful, to also conducting commerce on our digital platform. So that requires a lot of data insights, first of all, and being able to interpret the analytics that we have. It requires a lot of collaboration to get our messaging, content, copy, and everything just exactly perfect. And it also requires, experience too, on taking on personas and crafting your journeys so that they have efficient and productive platform-specific experiences. So we have opportunities to grow like everyone else, and for us, it's really that data piece, because hotels have a lot of, for lack of a better description, dogma. You want to put in an arrival date, you want to select a property, you want to pick a room type. How do you make the rest of this great? So taking the insights and understanding people's behaviors really allows us to start taking a journey into optimization and improving the experience and improving how we come to market. And then once again, that has to be iterative, collaborative, and data-driven. Great question.
Cool. So, Huey, maybe to expand upon this from the development perspective of creative skills, what have you seen as some of the major sort of stumbling blocks or challenges for organizations and industry when it comes to fostering creative skills?
Yeah, so I agree, Micah. On certain level, data, technology, digital are very, very important skills, in the area of creativity. in some of the organizations that I've seen, I think the lack of diversity is also a challenge. The lack of cognitive diversity, be it gender, be it age, race, ethnicity, just people with different backgrounds actually help, with the creative input, right? People with the right different sort of point of view can help with ideation and problem solving because they look at it from, a different lens. Another area will probably be culture. It's very important for the organization and the leader to set that culture for creativity, which is what many of the characteristics that you have mentioned and Mika has mentioned, right? About collaboration, openness, transparency, that safety for people to be able to speak up during interviews, during meetings, with no interruptions. There's no right or wrong. Setting a culture for trying different things, different ideas, even if it fail fast, and then quickly assess what are the issues, and then sort of re-looking at it and either dropping it completely or restarting it with a new lens are probably two areas, right? So diversity and culture as well for the organization.
So I'm just curious to kind of dig a little bit deeper on this idea of developing these creative skills. Easy to say if you're Swedish, right? Because I'm hearing loud and clear there that from a recruitment perspective, it's about actually diversifying your cognitive portfolio in many ways. And of course, all the research backs up that non-diverse companies are paying a penalty when it comes to profit growth and innovation, for example. And certainly culture, of course, is critical to nurture creativity. Culture often explained as the software of an organization. But I mean, I even just recall as a youth and as someone growing up in Sweden, that very early on in my education, teachers or society sort of divided into, here are the creatives and here are the non-creatives. I mean, how do we kind of get beyond that idea of, creativity just being art and design and something that someone, no matter what part of the organization, can actually learn and that they can nurture in themselves or have their leaders really fostering them? Have you got any thoughts? I'm happy for either of you to take that one first.
I'll take a quick response to that. It's an interesting thought, but creativity comes in a lot of formats. It's not just using Photoshop or Creative Cloud a certain way. It's how do you take the data and take an actionable insight and scale it across an organization. So creativity might be doing something new. It could come in the form of innovation. It could come in the form of new and improved processes. It could mean we restructure something on digital and go in a whole different direction because what we thought was great isn't so great anymore. So I think creativity comes in a lot of flavors. Yui mentioned diversity and diversity of thought, and I think that really is critical to having lots of points of views and the psychological safety to express those points of views without a tax or a penalty. Inspire that kind of continuously fresh outlook and enable that, non-creatives versus the creatives. No, we all have to be creatives, just in different ways.
Yui, any reflections or any builds on what Micah has just shared in terms of what Adobe or some of your clients are doing in terms of, really developing internally those creative skills?
Yeah, I think, in the current sort of situation, right, where, everything is sort of a blurred line, there's art, there's science, there's data, there's content. As these comes together, it's really hard to separate the creators from the non-creator. Everybody has to leverage their creativity, whether it's to be creative in art or creative in problem solving, or even creative in, assessing, looking at new opportunities, to address it, to take, benefit from some of these opportunities. And one thing that, Micah mentioned, which, resonate very well, is this leverage of data. With the explosion of data today, right? How do you use data to actually be more creative, to inform you of the decisions you made? In the past, it's all about gut feel, about intuition. But today, everything's about data because of the technology and the digital world that we live in.
I think, a great example of this, and I'm sure you've heard about this, is, when Netflix developed its poster for House of Cards back in the day, they were able to A/B split test and have a very data-driven approach to the way they then informed the creative that made the poster that would eventually, connect with the digital minds and the analog hearts of a very captive audience. But even down to the Pantone color of the poster, everything was data-driven to then, of course, give the creatives, which is everyone across the organization, the confidence to pursue a particular path. So I think, the only way to be truly human-centric as a brand today is to be very, very data-centric. Now, Micah, 500-pound gorilla, or let's put the moose on the table, as we would say in North America, right? You represent the tourism industry, one of the hardest hit industries during COVID. I'm curious to see, as a leader, if there are particular sort of creative skills that you value more, if anything's changed during COVID, and just how you, secondly, as a leader, try to nurture these creative skills remotely.
So we're still pretty young in our digital journey at Rosewood, but to talk more on the industry scale, I think there's a lot of the way things are done. People book hotels a certain way, like we mentioned, or you book a cruise or rent a car a certain way. And how do you challenge yourself to break some of that dogma and do it in a way that won't hurt you? Now, when COVID first hit, none of us fully recognized the scale and the impact of what was going to be happening. And then it kind of snowballed into this global game of whack-a-mole, where it pops up here, it's this country shut down, that country is open. We were actually standing up our Adobe platforms during the thick of the pandemic, as the world was really realizing what would happen. Now, we were fortunate in that we had a very global team from US, UK, India, Asia. The whole world was pretty much represented on our design and build teams. And we quickly made the assessment that, hey, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And we decided to press forward with our digital transformation, knowing that the next year and a half would be very rocky for all of us. And true to form it is. And it's especially been impactful to hotels, airlines, and our other brothers and cousins in the industry. Now, the flip side is that people sitting at home in front of Teams or Zoom or their favorite virtualization tool of choice, we've been able to bring together all those minds and really juice the creative processes. And, there's no people going home anymore. You're always home. So through this weird dynamic that's emerged in 2020, we feel that, we were dealt a tough hand, but coming out of this, we'll play better offense. And in the meantime, we'll play better defense. But it's, there's been a lot of moments of introspection along the way. I won't tell you otherwise. Yeah,
no doubt. And certainly still, by the sounds of it, at Rosewood Hotels Group, a lot of creativity even within quarantine. Yui, I'm curious, from your perspective at Adobe and your close relationship with clients and customers, what are you seeing changing in terms of the types of skills that organizations are really valuing in terms of creativity in quarantine and beyond?
Yeah, I think creativity is always important. With or without COVID. With quarantine and COVID, it makes it harder because creativity is all about collaboration. It's all about interpersonal sort of relationship and engagement. And with Zoom or VC, it's always going to be very hard, right? So organizations now have to be more, pardon the pun, more creative in trying to be creative, right? Whether it's having sort of very interesting sessions, fun sessions. It's not just about meetings, but having informal sessions, art jam, music jam, coming together to rebuild or maintain that long, relationship that has been easier, in pre-COVID times into the current situation. At Adobe, we actually did something really interesting. We had a 1 full day session of brainstorming for next year FY 2021 planning. And what we did to make it a bit more fun was to have an animator, artist, come in, join in our session, actually record down, draw down, illustrate the entire process throughout the day. At the end of the day, not only do we have our actual output in PPT and all that boring stuff and spreadsheets, but also have a very nice image of the thought process that we've been through throughout the day as we came up with ideas to address opportunities for next year. So that was really fun for us. It takes the dryness out of one full Zoom session for a full day, in terms of planning.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, picture says 1,000 words, right? And it's oftentimes, we communicate, more succinctly, right? It's the precursor to a tweet, right? Getting our points across, but visually. Micah, as a business leader, are there particular new skills that you're looking for in terms of recruiting or developing? And how do they change how you see your role as a leader facilitating creativity?
So first, there's the ability to partner. I think innovation and creativity many times have to come from outside of your organization, from fresh eyes, other perspectives, and kind of that egoless mentality where the great ideas and great creativity can come from anywhere. It is more important now than ever. And actually, COVID kind of enabled some of that because we were all tied to our desks. But I think, those that can support each other, and we look for those interpersonal skills more than ever now to inspire trust from peers and colleagues, to get all the cards on the table and display information in a way that everyone can connect to it, to receive feedback from a diverse group of stakeholders and make something productive out of it. Those are soft skills that maybe, 20 years ago, when you think of creative, you think someone with a pen or a computer or a tablet somewhere sequestered, where to Yui's point, it's really a very much collaborative process where quantitative, certain special interests, and digital artists all come together in a new way that is forcing us to rethink how we look at personalities and the kind of mix that we have here, because that's really a critical piece of the overall voodoo is how do you get that right mix with focus, accountability, and still the kind of output that you need. So it's an absolute challenge. I won't say we figured it out, but clearly the soft skills are more and more important. And, Yui was talking about what they did with Adobe. We try to open meetings with a few minutes of asking people how their families are, a joke or two, pick on someone who did something silly the prior day. Whatever the case may be is you can't let the distance make you less human. You have to figure out ways to create those vibrant connections from 8,000 miles away, which is also an interesting thing. And you see people that might be great in an office setting or in a client setting, but on a phone, they might be a little less vibrant. And, getting folks to connect that way has been a growth moment for all of us.
Yeah, and I mean, just as a quick aside here, just adding to those reflections, there's research out of Oklahoma State University that, in the context of the elections in the United States coming up, that when it comes to diversity and creativity, it's been shown that when somebody knows they have to make a business pitch or pitch a particular evidence-based paper to somebody who's of the opposite political affiliation and might be a little bit cognitively or values-based, very different, or even a polar opposite, they in fact work harder and smarter than if they knew they were pitching to someone of the same political affiliation. So, again, if you want to get the most out of your people creatively, working smarter and harder, really driving diversity from a recruitment perspective is going to be a key as well. So Yui, how do you believe that organizations whether at Adobe or elsewhere, can really, foster these skills? What do they need to do? Anything you can share from your experience?
Yeah, I guess setting that tone, it's important. At a leadership level, like Mike has mentioned, when you ever start a meeting, the host of the meeting to set that tone, asking a few questions that's more personal, family oriented, not work, to actually set that tone, right? To encourage collaboration, as I mentioned earlier, letting people speak their minds in a very safe environment would be, a way to set that culture. Having said that, we talked about earlier as well, in terms of leveraging data, as, in this digital, as data becomes more important in meetings, right, in reviews, to actually leverage more of technology and data to inform our decisions and planning would probably be another area that companies and organizations should look at.
So I'm fascinated. You're both coming back to this idea of the art and the science of creativity. How it's it sounds like it's flipped from this lonely genius having a breakthrough eureka moment to now organizations really looking at data-driven creativity and innovation. And given that it's an art and a science, certainly these things must be trainable. Or am I thinking totally incorrect here?
No, I think you're right. The challenge for every business is to look at the analytics and say, okay, what are my key levers to moving these needles? And then focusing your efforts on moving those levers. And everyone's got a different playbook, and we're still trying to crack that code as a company ourselves, like I assume all of my peers and competitors are. But that's really where you're going to make your hay, because at the end of the day, this isn't a hobby. We're here to do something. So, taking those analytics, are we looking at the right analytics? And then really challenging our teams to create actionable insights out of them, as opposed to just handing over pretty charts and graphs, is where you're going to either win or lose in this new age. And that's really what we focus on as a team more than anything else, is the so what factor. So there's a page full of numbers. So what? What's good? What's bad? What do we magnify? What do we stop? What's our action item? How do we make this bigger, stronger, and more potent? And sometimes that's creative. Sometimes it's the bones of your commerce. But it's understanding what it is to move those needles that's really, really directing where and how we're creative.
So I'm just curious there, Mike. Talking about the future and where the Rosewood Hotels Group might go next. I'm curious to see, do you have a psychometric or a psychographic sort of map of your team's creative potential and any latent potential? And do you have a blueprint that you're following in terms of squeezing the most out of the lemon, to continue that metaphor?
Well, I hope none of them are watching this. But we have those psychographic profiles queued up for the end of this year. So we'll be looking to gain those insights into the right team alchemy and coaching people to, bring out their best in terms of how we drive that collaboration as a focus in the next year. Absolutely. Great point, Anders. And gosh, I hope none of them are watching this.
All right. Gathering data on the customer and creativity centricity moving forward. So, Huey, looking at the future as well, are you seeing more partners and customers exploring this novel area of creativity, or do they just go, hey, you guys are Adobe, you guys figure it out, you're the creatives? How do they optimize and prioritize creativity and creative skills at the moment?
Yeah, a lot of our customers, a lot of our partners are treating creative as a top priority. At many of our global partners, the IBMs, the Deloittes and Accentures, where you think of them as traditional IT consulting powerhouses, they are all now focusing on creativity, right? Combining strategy, creativity, digital technology together to solve problems. They're coming up with for example, IBM have their IX, their interactive experience group that really focus on this area. Deloitte have their Deloitte Digital, and Accenture have Accenture Interactive, all just focusing on combining this different sort of fields together to ideate and to solve problems. I was just recently at an IBM studio in Shanghai. It's really cool. It's a very relaxed setting with many designs that's enable for collaboration, brainstorming and ideation. And imagine IBM was founded like more than 100 years ago, and they are into this creativity now. And needless to say, we had a very productive meeting about a week ago.
So, I mean, based on that and what you're seeing from IBM and other partners and customers, what do you think is next in terms of organizations really, harnessing creativity and assessing the creative potential within their teams? This is
I think for a lot of organizations, combining content and data will be key. Looking at experience, right, from their customers' point of view, it's very, very important, especially in today's COVID situation where the face-to-face interaction is getting less. That digital experience is becoming even more important. Understanding what your customers do online, what's their profile, what's their preference, what's their likes, in real time, and serving them the right content, the right promo, the right offer, so that they immediately get it, they are engaged immediately, they stay on longer at your digital properties, they sort of take on your offer. It's really, really important in the current sort of times today.
So, I mean, one sort of sense or ethos we've sort of kept coming back to today is the idea of compassion or empathy and customer centricity, and really connecting with our customers, and sort of linking that back towards internal creativity, and the fact that creativity is not just the art and the design. It sounds like there's a sort of an underlying theme here of just emotional intelligence and empathy. How important are those in terms of almost like as a precursor, do you think, to creative expression, Micah?
I think it's really important, Anders. As we mentioned, and Yui's mentioned this as well, it's taking the data, it's collaborating with your stakeholders, it's creating actionable insights, and then partnering with all those stakeholders who each have their own agendas and priorities to take on parts of your agenda and show how it'll help them. So the empathy is really, really critical, because if it's all about digital and digital results, you'll fall on deaf ears quite often. But if you can figure out the storytelling skills in order to build those connections with your stakeholders and validate that their part of the story is your part of the story as well, you'll probably be more successful with your agenda, probably. But, as we take that journey, there's a lot of growth involved, and it's the willingness to partner. It's the willingness to get away from I think, I feel, and really take a hard look at reality through those numbers, and then take the right action. Great question.
Cool. So it's human centricity through data centricity. Fascinating conversation, gentlemen. We are in the end zone. Thank you so much for hanging out here on Adobe CQ, Making the Modern Leader. Some really great insights. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Yui. Thank you, Anders.
Thank you,
and, thank you, Yui. And before we move forward, remember, we are here every Tuesday discussing the future of creative leadership. Next week, I'm joined on the show by Johanna Lowe, who's the Director of Marketing and Communications at the University of Sydney, as well as Suzanne Steele, who's the Managing Director for Adobe in Australia and New Zealand, I should say, our neighbours down south, down under. We will be exploring and decoding how creativity plays an extraordinarily important role in shaping customer experience. I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, same time, same channel here on LinkedIn Live. Ciao.
Thank you.